Today we have our very first female client here because it's been amazing. We haven't had a lady yet.
Well,
Yeah, the very first.
this
So
needs to change.
yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah. But the reason why is we just had to take it as it came.
Yeah.
And we had to talk about, first was about inclusion and diversity. Next we talked about well-being.
Yeah.
And today we'll be talking about resilience.
Resilience, mindset, the
Yeah.
meaning of work and life, wherever you want to go, Larry.
All right, let's do this. Okay, so for starters, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Linda Boyd. I'm the founder and CEO of Clue. I'm from Australia, but have chosen to relocate to Cyprus. It's a beautiful little island, and there's lots of interesting things happening here. The reason I actually decided to stay is because I spoke at a conference a year ago, and one of your partners, Cleo, was in the audience, and she reached out to me and she said, I think PwC and our clients would benefit from what you're talking about. And one thing led to another, and here I am. So Cyprus is my new home.
Welcome.
Thank you. I mean, it's not Australia, but there's 300 days of summer, and right now with what's happening going on in the world, that's more summer than Australia's getting.
Yeah, true.
But my background, I'm a serial entrepreneur, so I built quite a big business in Australia in the human capital space. We placed over 30,000 people in jobs, and then I evolved to being a coach for executives, entrepreneurs, business owners, CEOs around how to extract the most value from human capital.
All right.
Yeah, and I on that journey, I learned some stuff about what makes human beings tick and what gives meaning to work, and also how to overcome difficulties. And so my new venture is a technology business which trains the brain to be happy at work.
That's great. Okay, now looking at, you definitely have a very deep background and deep knowledge about things that have to do with emotions, resilience, and based on how the world is going and what we've been through with regards to the pandemic. Okay, what do you think is really important for people to be able to build resilience?
Very good question. I think, even before the pandemic, in 2019, the World Health Organization said the biggest problem facing the world is mental health. So the pandemic hasn't created the problem, but it has accelerated the problem.
Okay.
And I think that, I adopt a growth mindset in everything I do. And you're a coach, Larry, so you understand what I'm talking about, which is, when something challenging happens, you can choose to be a victim, or you can choose to take the learnings and how to grow from that. So there's no doubt that the pandemic has created a lot of trauma. Now, it doesn't matter whether you lost your job, you lost a loved one. I lost 2 loved ones due to the pandemic. It doesn't really matter which echelon of life you are in. I don't think there's anyone that has been left unaffected by the pandemic.
True.
Human beings have some core human needs. One of them is for safety and security. And one of the most stressful things for human beings is uncertainty. And so what the pandemic has done has created immense uncertainty. We were all going along and life would have its challenges.
Yeah.
But we sort of thought we knew what the future held.
We knew, we had it all figured out.
Yeah. And unfortunately, the pandemic has shown us that things can change instantly.
Yeah.
So, there's different definitions of resilience. For me, resilience is not about overcoming hard things. It's about overcoming hard things and ending up better on the other side. So the resilience required to overcome the pandemic and be resilient generally it's an inner state, and it's a choice that you make. And that choice is about growing from hardship. It's also a set of skills that you can learn. So, human beings, we have this beautiful brain.
Yeah.
And our brain sends us safety signals in the forms of anxiety, depression, stress. We think that's a problem. But actually, our brain is doing a beautiful job. So we don't have a mental health crisis, we have a stress crisis. So the key to being resilient is to learn how to manage stress, understand the signals and what to do when they're there. So I don't know if that really answered the question around resilience,
yes,
but the best thing that we can all do to be resilient is develop the capability and the skills to manage stress. And the reality is stress comes from two key places: our own minds,
which is a significant
so learning how to master the mind and the mind talk that happens.
Yes.
And the second thing is other human beings.
All right.
If we were stranded on a desert island, there'd probably be no stress.
Yeah, as long as you got food, right?
Because there'd be no other human beings.
Oh.
What gives our life meaning and purpose is connection.
Yes.
It's this.
Yeah.
It's talking to a like-minded person. It's feeling like there's a connection there.
Yes. Yes.
And in the absence of connection, we suffer as human beings. We emerged in tribes 30,000 years ago on the savannas of Africa. We went from being in groups to being in tribes.
Yeah.
Tribes have leaders, it has a social hierarchy, everybody has a role to play. And so what COVID has done is just, it's like, you know those ice globes?
Yes.
And they have snow in them? And you just shake them?
And then everything's all over the whole place.
That's where we are.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
And everybody's just trying to make sense of the human aspect of all this. So the pandemic has been incredibly difficult for people, all people. But what it has done is highlighted the value of connection, the importance of resilience, and that emotional well-being is something that needs to be cultivated. It's not something that's just expected.
Yeah, yeah. Now, you said something about cultivating emotional well-being. How can we find, practices that would help us cultivate this more as people?
Well, I think first prioritizing it. One of my favorite quotes is, energy flows where the intention goes.
Gotcha. That's right. Yeah.
So first the intention that emotional health, mental health, emotional well-being is the most important thing. And it really is. Because it doesn't matter how physically fit and strong you are, if you don't actually have the right mindset to overcome challenges, to achieve goals, then you might look good, but you don't feel good. So, I think one aspect is the intention. I think the second thing is there's practices. Now, things like yoga and meditation and, they're nice things, but they're more maintenance things, right? So when you're stressed, you meditate, or to manage your stress, you do yoga. They're helpful. There's nothing wrong with them. But I think in the first place, we need to take a step forward, and we need to try and prevent stress-related problems. Now, you do that by teaching people skills. So when we're little, we go to school and we learn science and technology and English and maths, but no one teaches us how to be human.
True.
So we need to start investing in workplaces, in schools, in educational institutions on how to teach people to manage the most important part of life and work and success, which is mindset. Yeah.
So it's really important to have that growth mindset and learn from past experiences, because you can, your past experiences can either be a burden or it can be a good teacher for you to move forward.
A good teacher, and I think we're all off looking for other people to learn from, and that's important, but we actually have all the wisdom we need inside us. We just need a way to access it.
And activate it,
exactly. So, from a skill set point of view, it's what I call emotional fitness. So it's just like physical fitness, but it's for the emotional aspect of life. So you don't get physically fit by watching videos of fit people doing exercises.
No, you don't.
I've tried.
It doesn't work. Unless you can build.
It's like, okay, I'm watching, but it's not. I'm not getting any fitter.
No. Where are those muscle bumps? I can see
So mental muscles are exactly the same. So first of all, you need to understand where you need to get strong. Then you need to know the right exercises to do. And then you need to do the exercises regularly, so eventually they become a set of habits.
Oh.
So these are what I call emotional fitness habits. So obviously I've developed an application that trains people's brains to develop emotional fitness. The methodology involved in that is we don't learn things unless, well, some people do, but most people don't learn things unless you do them. You experience something.
Practice.
The difficulty with developing emotional and social skills is there's a social risk of getting it wrong.
Okay.
So people really value connection because we're part of tribes. This is what gives our life's meaning and purpose. What that means, though, is making a social mistake is scary.
Yeah.
So in Clue, we created a safe virtual world where people can practice applying different techniques in interacting with other people.
Yeah.
And my avatar says, great stuff, or not bad, but try this.
Yeah.
And then there's a little emotional fitness odometer. Like a speedometer in a car. And depending on the choice you make, it goes up or down.
Interesting.
And so you know if you're doing it right.
Yeah.
And so you keep doing it right and you practice, and that creates a new neural pathway in your brain. But if you're not using Clue, there's a couple of things that you can do. So there's really 3 parts to emotional fitness. The first part is self. Now, you mentioned yoga and you mentioned meditation. They're really nice, helpful things for managing stress and being zen. The only challenge is they're individual.
All right, true.
What matters to human beings most is connection.
All right.
So we're not going to solve our problem around emotional well-being on our own. We have to connect with other human beings.
Okay.
However, before we can connect, we need to manage ourselves. So the first thing we teach people is emotional regulation. So instead of letting emotions lead you, you manage your emotions. So you apply, it's why it's called emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
You apply your intellect to matters of emotion, so that your intelligence is managing your emotions, not your emotions hijacking your intelligence. So it's when you get on a plane and they say put your own oxygen mask on first.
Yeah, true. Just like that.
So the first thing we do is teach people how to put their oxygen mask on. So in stressful situations, what can they do to make sure that their emotions don't hijack rational thinking? That's the first thing. So you don't react rather than respond. When
hopefully.
When we say those things and go, did I really say that?
Yeah.
That's because you weren't thinking, because you were just being driven by emotion. So that's the first thing we teach people. The second thing is to truly connect with another human being, because that is where the most joy and fulfillment and happiness comes from. And that is about empathy first. You can't connect with someone else if you can't empathize. And sometimes we make a mistake that we think empathy is sympathy, feeling sorry for someone else.
No.
That is actually not connecting. Feeling sorry is disconnecting.
Mm-hmm.
Because often when you feel sorry for someone, you're putting yourself on a higher pedestal. A superiority pedestal, and you're going, I'm sorry for you. That's not an equal place.
Yeah.
True empathy is actually being able to share in the emotional experience the person's having. So I give you an example. I just lost not just one, but both my parents. Very hard for someone to sympathize, or very easy for people to sympathize, but very hard for people to empathize if they think of empathy of having lost both their parents.
Yeah.
How many people are going to meet that just lost both their parents? But you and anyone watching or listening has lost someone or something that they valued a lot. Yeah. So if they connect to what that felt like, they're empathizing with me. Yeah. And if they share that with me, then in that instance, it creates a connection. So the way that we empathize is by being vulnerable.
Key word.
So vulnerability is the key to connection, but it's a really hard thing for people to do.
But why is that, though?
Why is that? That's a very good question, because I myself am pretty tough and I've found it hard to be emotionally vulnerable at times. I think the risk is that you get judged and you get rejected.
Yeah.
So, or that somehow by being vulnerable, people think you're small or weak.
Yeah.
And particularly for men.
Yeah, I know. It's a heavy...
Men find it really hard to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But it's not just men.
Yeah.
Most people find it really hard to be vulnerable.
True. But how does that affect us being more inclusive, right? So if we know that we'll be judged easily, then that means I would not be able to bring myself, my whole self to work, or my whole self in whatever interactions I'm having with people, right?
Yeah. So I think the fabric or the foundation of inclusiveness, and I'm actually speaking at a conference in a couple of weeks about this, and I'm trying to explain inclusion or inclusiveness. It's not a process, it's not a policy, it's a mindset.
It is.
And leaders, to create an inclusive culture, need to create a space of psychological safety where people can be vulnerable, and it's safe to be vulnerable. So what that means is that you can say or do things that other people may not agree with, but you don't get judged, you don't get cut down, you don't lose your promotion.
Yeah.
You know?
You don't get scared to actually express and be yourself. Because I think at times when people hold back and they're not themselves, then we have lots of uncertainty, we have lots of confusion, and we have a case where we don't allow people be themselves, and I think that's a little bit problematic.
Yeah, and I think it's because people don't know how, right? So when someone, and this goes back to training and capability, if someone says something that is really vulnerable, sometimes people just don't know how to respond. And so they say nothing.
Yeah.
And that silence creates this sense of judgment or rejection. And so it's a two-way thing. We need to learn to be vulnerable, but we also need to learn how to hold the space and how to engage when someone is vulnerable.
Okay.
So it's this two-way thing.
Well, what if I play a little bit the devil's advocate here, right?
Do it.
Let's do it. Let me be the bad guy. All right. So I come off as this very vulnerable person and is open in sharing his thoughts and his expressions, his emotions, his feelings. The sad part of it is, in the real world we live in today, leaders cannot afford to be seen as vulnerable. And in most of the corporate environments we are, the tougher you look, the more firm you are, the more, assertive you are, the more people respect you. So how do we balance that conundrum that as human beings? From one side we say it's okay to be vulnerable, and we do accept that it is, but from the other side we really don't respect people that are that vulnerable.
So this is a killer question. I love this question. You talked about leaders who are like superheroes. Yeah? Do we respect them or do we fear them?
We fear them.
There you go. So what you are going to see in the future is the rise of what I call feminine leadership. It's not women leading, but it's feminine leadership. So masculinity is about status, power, drive, dominance. Feminine energy is about wisdom,
caring,
intuition, empathy, inclusion, collaboration. The world as it has been, which has been dominated by masculine energy, is not working. And so you're going to see the pendulum swinging, and I'm not necessarily saying that you are going to see women leading the world.
Yeah.
But you are going to see people attracted and embracing feminine style leadership. Because everybody wants to matter.
Yeah, that's one of the most important things.
To matter, to feel significant, that sense of connection. The most powerful organizations, the best leaders in the future, will lead with empathy, with vision, with strength, but they won't dominate.
Right.
Yeah.
I hope one day we get to see those days, right? Because it's really important that, companies, organizations, people as we are, start embracing that and start being able to appreciate the fact that one person does care about the other people does not necessarily mean weakness or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm being vulnerable. I'm a female leader.
Yeah, you still come off as a tough lady if you need to be.
I'm strong.
That's it.
You know, vulnerable is not a weakness. You can be vulnerable, but you can be strong.
Yes.
And so breaking down those mindsets that vulnerability means weakness is what we have to overcome.
True.
You know, I can be vulnerable. I still find it hard, but I'm still trying to work out why.
All right, we'll definitely have to talk about that after this.
But I'm getting there.
Yeah.
And it's because I deeply believe that that's how you connect. And anyone who thinks they can achieve things on their own by dominating others, it might work short term.
Yeah.
But not long term.
No, never does.
Because people break.
And people leave as well.
People break, or people just switch off. Think of this as a statistic. Back in 2012, Gartner did the biggest engagement survey in the world of employees.
All right.
It was millions of employees across 142 different countries. And what they found was that 87% of people were not engaged at work. Only 13% of people loved their work and coming to work. And in fact, we were twice as likely to hate our jobs as like it.
Wow.
Now, from a purely commercial point of view, so here's the business me, because ultimately businesses don't exist as charities.
No, they're not.
Money makes the world go round.
True.
I view money as the token to get into the game of life.
True.
We all need it.
We all need it.
Food, education,
Clothes,
services, clothes, Larry.
Water. Even need to pay for water these days, right?
And water. My God, yeah, we've got to buy water. So, you know, money's not our enemy. I guess it's how we earn it and how we use it that matters. But money is required for our core human need for safety and security to be met. So it's important. So going back to the study, so, you know, only 13% of people love their jobs. But we know that when people love their jobs, when they're highly engaged at work, they deliver 45% higher productivity than those that aren't. But only 13% of people in organisations are doing that.
Yeah.
So it makes logical sense. And if you look at some of the greatest companies in the world that are not necessarily the big brands, you know, but they're very significant businesses, and they focus on high employee engagement. And what employee engagement is a feeling.
Yeah.
It's not a score on an engagement survey.
Yeah.
It's what we call discretionary effort. That in a moment we could do average, we could do minimum,
So
you want to
do more.
Yeah? You want to create value. Those companies grow faster and deliver higher earnings per share to shareholders.
And definitely they have less turnovers as well.
Oh, no question. Lower staff turnover, lower sick leave, lower mental health issues in the workforce, but most importantly, much more highly engaged customers. And organisations exist to serve customers.
True.
PwC's customers pay your wages.
True.
So a smart leader a really, truly effective leader will understand how to capture the hearts and minds of their people, because it leads to better commercial outcomes.
So that means it's definitely important for us to ensure that the right people are empowered. Right people being people who are emotionally intelligent,
yes,
and who are willing to improve the emotional intelligence, right?
Yes. Gee, you're a good interviewer. The wonderful thing about emotional intelligence is, unlike intellectual intelligence, IQ, EQ can be developed. So IQ, you're pretty much stuck with what you're born with. You know, you might be able to...
Maybe at the low end of things.
Yeah, but you might be able to, you know, through education, shift it up a little bit, but not significantly.
Yeah.
But the good news is the biggest predictor of performance at work is EQ, not IQ. So it doesn't matter how smart you were born, providing that you have the ability to learn reasonably effectively and you have the desire, you can build your EQ, the measure of emotional intelligence. And EQ is listed in the top 10 skills required for the future of work.
Interesting.
So it's higher than coding, it's higher than data analytics, it's higher than robotics. because it's the one thing machines can't do.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because I say this a lot. As you go further up and you look at the hierarchy and you see people at the top, you actually realize that it's soft skills at the end of the day that really takes it. Like the president of a country is not an expert at defense or building guns or computer hacking and stuff. It's just being able to manage people.
Yeah, and there's a difference, I think, between managing and leadership. Managing is organizing resources.
Yeah.
Leadership is inspiring others to realize their potential. So great leaders know how to inspire people to achieve things they never thought they could do.
Make them believe in themselves as well.
Yeah, and it's to bring people together because, nothing can be achieved on your own. There's that saying, we exist in relation to others. So no one notices we're doing anything great if there's no one around.
True.
So other human beings really matter. And there's a magic that happens when you build a team of people who are inspired to greatness. And I don't mean greatness as in changing the world. I mean their greatness. So a leader's job is to inspire greatness in each individual and help them realize their full potential. And if a leader does that with every person on their team, that team can change the world.
True, very true. Now, you said something about leaders, and for you to be a leader, you need to have the right value, right?
Okay, so I think leadership is a mindset. So I have twice had the opportunity to spend a week with Richard Branson. So Richard Branson on his private island, Necker Island.
Look at you.
Yeah, I know, it was amazing.
Give me a call the next time, I'll join you.
Okay. And it was amazing. And, Richard's obviously a billionaire. He successfully taken the first commercial aircraft to the moon, to space.
Yeah.
And he has an interest in 550 different businesses. Now, Richard is dyslexic, both with numbers and letters.
Wow.
And so for him to be successful, he had to work out very quickly how to delegate and how to inspire others to greatness. So I asked Richard, and I was a bit nervous, and I asked Richard, how do you choose the leaders that you put in charge of your companies? And he said, I look for one thing. I was like, what is that? And he said, I look for people who want to lift others up. And I've never forgotten that. So when I'm hiring someone to work with me, of course I want to know what value they can bring to Clue.
Yeah.
Of course I want to know if they're going to serve our customers well.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, do I have what's required to help you grow? And I think that is true leadership.
That's very deep, and it's definitely one of those things I'll be taking with me from this. Another thing I've thought about is, okay, we're trying to create a more inclusive world. We're trying to have people more to be more emotionally intelligent. How can we build this up in people and give them that emotional intelligence to be able to relate better, to be able to be more resilient, and to be able to really cope in today's crazy world?
Yeah. And it is crazy, right?
Yeah, it is.
So emotional intelligence is a set of skills, competencies. So just like if you don't know how to use Excel, you can do a course and you can learn it. Emotional intelligence is the same thing. But there's a caveat. So I might just spend a moment, if we're okay for time, just explaining what the competencies of emotional intelligence are.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. So this is a really simple model. There's a quadrant model. So there's there's 4 parts to emotional intelligence. First, it's about yourself, and then it's about other people, and then it's about awareness, and then it's about management. So first we need to be aware of ourselves and the role that emotions play in the way we think and behave.
Right.
Yeah. So awareness is one. The next one is management. So we're aware that when we're angry, we're short, or we are aggressive, right? We've got the awareness, but that's all great, but it doesn't change anything. So the next thing is the management. So how do I identify when I'm in an emotional state that doesn't lead to great outcomes, or how do I identify how to manage myself out of that emotional state to get a better outcome? And it works the other way. If I feel a certain way and that leads to good outcomes, how can I engineer that state to get a better outcome, right?
Yeah.
So that's the awareness and the management piece around self. But of course, as I said, we exist in relation to others. So the other part of the quadrant is awareness of how other people are feeling, and then being able to manage how other people are feeling. So give you an example. I don't really know how you're feeling now, but I can look at your hands, I can look in your eyes, I can look at your facial expression, and I can learn techniques to try and read your emotional state.
Right.
Your tone of voice will tell me, your pitch of voice, so many things. So I can learn the skills to read your emotional state. Then based on your emotional state, I can change the way I interact with you to change your emotional state. So if I saw signals that you were angry right now, and I'm aware of that anger, then I have learned, if I've learned emotional intelligence skills, I've learned how to shift your emotional state by what I say and what I do.
Exactly.
So that's emotional intelligence. Thinking about what's going on for me, what's going on for you, and applying the techniques that can shift the state.
All right. So that sounds interesting. It sounds a bit complicated, but you're obviously trained, and you're an expert in the field. So if I had to just talk to the next guy out there in the street, or a colleague, and I'm trying to give them an advice on how they can be more emotionally intelligent, how could I express that to them to help them?
Yeah, okay, so it's simple. Okay, so I'll say two things. First of all, one of the things I think is wrong with the world is everybody wants a quick fix.
Yeah.
Right? How do I get more? Emotional intelligence is the most valuable thing. And so it's not something you can learn overnight. But a starting point is self-awareness.
Yes.
So start just being aware of the way you feel, how that impacts how you think and behave, and then how other people behave towards you.
True.
So it's just about increasing awareness. So when you, and there's one little technique I'll teach you.
Yeah,
it's very
please
cool.
do.
It's very cool.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's actually an NLP technique, which is neuro-linguistic programming. And it's very powerful around self-mastery. But it's called first, second, and third position. So in any situation like now, there's first position, which is my position.
Yeah.
What I'm experiencing and how I'm experiencing you in this situation. And then there's second position, which is what's going on for you over there. And then there's third position, a neutral observer, watching, from the outside or above, watching what's going on between us. So in any situation, most of the time we're in first position.
Yeah.
So if you just shift into second position and look back at yourself from the other person's point of view, what do you see? What do you hear?
Yeah.
So it's like teleporting.
True.
I'm going to teleport myself into Larry,
And then
I'm going to
back.
think about how he's experiencing me right now.
Cool.
And so if most people in the workplace or in life could just put themselves in second position, it would be profoundly impactful.
True. Well, that's something I think we should all learn, and something I think we should all practice, more importantly, because action speaks louder than words.
Yes.
Now, some final thing. I've been thinking a lot about resilience, and the fact is, resilience. You don't build resilience from having not experienced hardship, right?
Yeah, and that's really important. I think our generation of children haven't necessarily experienced any hardship.
Yeah.
And so that's why we're seeing a generation of kids who are not highly resilient, or young people who are not highly resilient. We grow through struggle. It's very hard to learn resilience if you've never had to be resilient.
True.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So it's only when you're faced with a challenge do you learn how to rally through that? So building resilience is actually about getting people out of their comfort zone and getting them to struggle with some stuff.
Yeah.
And that's how you build resilience skills. I wish there was
a magic
red
fix.
pill.
You'll take and just get resilient and tough.
But the way to become resilient is to get out of your comfort zone, take on challenges, and build resilient skills by struggling through challenge.
All right. Thank you so much. And just one final thing out. People want to be happy. Yep. Everybody's always looking to it. And some people believe happiness is just a destination. How would you define the quest or the search for happiness?
Wow, that's a big question, but not as big as most people think. I think, you can look at happiness as out here, or you can find happiness in here.
Yeah.
Most people go looking in the world for a guru, or for Anthony Robbins, or a book, or whatever. I think, I used to believe happiness is everybody's right. I think you earn happiness. And you earn happiness by giving up the things that make you unhappy.
So more about focusing on your center of control, being grateful, gratitude, maybe.
There's gratitude. I think mostly happiness is about meaning, the meaning we give to things. Things don't have meaning in and of themselves.
Yes.
Things have meaning based on the meaning we give them. So, happiness is it's a feeling, and feelings, are generated based on how we think. So cultivating healthy thoughts that focus on getting people's core needs met leads to happiness.
Yes.
But I think a lot of people are looking for happiness in other people, in their jobs, in their bank account, in the size of their car.
And how sexy the car looks.
Yeah. And how snappy a dress that they are.
Yeah.
All those things are lovely. They're great.
But
they're surface level.
Yeah, they are.
Happiness is something to cultivate. You need to work at it. It's not something you should expect you just have.
Yeah.
You need to work at it. Like putting effort in, you only get the things that we value the most through effort.
True.
What do we value most? Happiness, which means you have to
work
at
for it.
We value love. To get love, you've got to give it.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Relationships with other human beings, they're the biggest source of stress. You know why? Because they're the biggest source of happiness.
True.
So I guess the moral of the story is you got to do the work.
Yeah.
But it's not hard. When you decide, when the intention is, I'm going to be happy.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Easy. Yeah.
Yeah. And
because
it's fun.
You focus on that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right, Linda, thank you so much for having us.
My pleasure.
I'm sure we could do this for days
we
could.
I think we'll continue this conversation.
We will. Right
yeah,
after
you
this.
asked some great questions, Larry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure having
Thank
you.
you.
Cheers. Thank you.